I'm HK Green. I am a contemporary romance author, and I am releasing my debut novel in 3 weeks on August 16th. It's called The Pieces We've Lost, and it's a cowboy romance that follows two people, Coulter and Ellison, who have both experienced trauma surrounding rodeo.
Mhm.
And yeah.
I'm actually, it's on next on my list of arcs to read, so I'm actually really excited to get into it. What was your inspiration for the pieces we've lost?
Yeah, so I grew up in Montana. I'm from a very small town in Montana, like 100 people. Um, but I grew up in agriculture. I grew up on a farm and grew up around rodeos and all of the Western culture and Western lifestyle. And so I knew that if I wanted to write a book that I'd want, at least in the moment, because writing this book was kind of just a spur of the moment thing. But I knew going into it that I wanted to write a book based on something that I already was familiar with. So it wasn't really too difficult to come up with wanting to write a cowboy romance. Um, my boyfriend is from Montana as well, but he grew up in a ranching family and he used to rodeo. So uh, it's it's pretty inspired by also his lifestyle and his family. His dad was a team roper, so that's kind of where I got Coulter from. Coulter's a team roper, and it's also a little bit kind of inspired by my own relationship, but not really. Like it's a little bit similar. There were a lot of things that I kind of projected from myself and my relationship into the book. Um, Ellison is pretty she's pretty resistant to Coulter at first, just not wanting to fall in love with a cowboy or be involved with rodeo at all, just because of her past trauma. And when I met my boyfriend, at first I was kind of like, oh, this guy's way too nice. I don't know if I actually like him. But then obviously started to grow on me a little bit and just so it was a little bit inspired by that too.
It's always good when you can take a bit of your own life and just like slop it into the your characters' ones as well. What drew you to writing in the first place?
So I always liked to read. I, like I said, writing this book was kind of a spur of the moment thing. I wasn't really planning on writing a book. Um, but I got back into reading back in 2022, started my Bookstagram account in 2023. And so I was in the book community for about a year before I decided to write a book. Um, and I had read a couple cowboy romances, but really not too many. Um, but we were going to the grocery store or something like that, going to get groceries, and I just looked over at him and I was like, "What if I just wrote a book?" And then I did. So this is truly my debut novel. I haven't written any other manuscript before this one. This is the first full one that I've actually ever written. Um, because I don't count the 30-page handwritten story that I wrote in fifth grade as a book. So this is the first full book that I've ever written.
It's great that you were focusing it more on the rodeo because I read cowboy romances which are like ranching ones but not so much rodeo focus. So I'm it's definitely you haven't a book that I haven't seen before or read before, so I'm actually really excited for people to read it. How did you choose which character to focus the story around?
So when I was coming up with the idea, it was definitely I developed the female character first. The plot kind of centered around her, and then but it is dual point of view, so it alternates between the two of them. Um, and I knew that I wanted a dual POV just because I like reading those stories. But I definitely had to develop the male character Coulter a little bit more as I got through the story. Um, Ellison's character was pretty much decided, but there was some more open area for Coulter's character and where I wanted his story to go. So in the beginning of the book, I feel like it's mostly focusing on Ellison and her development. And then as you get through the book more, you get a little glimpse of it in the beginning of Coulter, but as you go through the story, you start to get more of his background. And they just work together to heal from their traumas and their experiences. And so I really like the dual POV in that aspect, that you get to see both sides of the healing and how how they're helping each other through that.
I really love the dual point of views in books as well, because I get to see both sides of the what they're thinking. Which one did you find easier to write, Allison's or Coulter's?
I feel like Ellison was easier to write just because I wrote her how I think I would respond in certain situations, or how I would respond. Um, Ellison had her father pass away from a rodeo accident, and both of my parents are still alive. So I kind of had to think about how I would react in that situation, which made it pretty emotional, actually, just kind of thinking about those situations. So I think she was a lot easier to write, just because of that. But I also kind of projected a lot of um, my boyfriend into Coulter. So I kind of knew already how, oh, this is how like he might react to the situation. But there was a little bit more of filling in the gaps and kind of like not making it completely like based off of a different person.
Yep.
Or somebody that's actually real. But I do think Ellison was a little bit easier because she's so much like me.
What was your process of writing your book? Did you plot everything out, or were you just write whatever scenes that came into your head?
I didn't plot anything. I had a short outline document with the characters, um, just some of the tropes that I was going off of based on what I had thought of the plot line and the storyline at first. And then I kind of outlined, I guess I outlined a couple chapters, just of the very basics, like a very bare bones outline of what was going to happen, but I didn't plot it out really at all. And I write out of order. So that's just how my process works. I wrote things as they came to me. So I wrote the prologue and then chapter one first. And then I wrote, there's a flashback scene in about 75% of the book that I wrote next. And then I wrote the conflict. I went back to the beginning, and then I just kind of had to fill in the gaps.
Yeah.
But that was the process that worked for me.
As long as you got through the book and it's all got all the plot line through, so that's all that matters at the end of the
I
day.
did, yeah. And it was really easy. It came really easily to me. I came up with the idea last July, about a little over a year ago, and I wrote about 3,000 to 5,000 words, I think. I took a break the month of August and then really committed to it in September. And I had my first draft done by the end of October of last year. So it only took me about 50 days to write the whole first draft. And then I had an alpha reader, a close friend, read through it, and I did some self edits. And then I did 2 rounds of beta readers, and my editor also beta read for me. Then I did copy edits, had a separate editor proofread, and then my original editor proofread the final formatted version. So I spent about 5 to 6 months just editing the book also.
Wow. But you got that's really fast to actually have written a book. It's really amazing. Did you have a favorite moment in the book to write?
I really liked writing the rodeo scenes. I think those were some of my favorites to write just because I felt like I was in it. When I write, I don't picture things as I'm writing, and when I'm reading, I can't really picture it in my mind. But for some reason, just like writing those rodeo scenes, it felt like I was there, and I could feel like the anticipation and the pressure and the tension in those scenes. So I really love those, but there's also some of those more emotional moments in the book that I really enjoyed. But they also kind of made me cry. So
I'm the same. I can't when I'm reading, like I can sort of gather what the scene would look like, but I don't really have like pictures in my head. and it depends on the book that I'm reading too. Sometimes it happens, sometimes it doesn't, but typically I don't get a book, a vision of what it is. So it's interesting that some people have that, some people don't.
Yeah, like for some people, it plays out like a movie in their head, and it doesn't really for me. So I relied pretty heavily, like for my character descriptions at least, on Pinterest photos and those face claims. And that's one thing that I I guess it's not that something that I struggle with, but something that's a little bit more challenging is the descriptors. I'm a lot better at writing the emotional aspect of books. Um, and that was where my beta readers and editors came in really handy and were really helpful, was just telling me what areas of the book I needed to describe things better in the setting. Um, but yeah, so there, it just really depends on the book too. There's a couple books where I could picture it, like I think One Italian Summer, the descriptions were just so vivid that I could picture it, but they really have to be described in a lot of detail for
Yes,
me.
definitely. Are there any books or authors that inspired you to actually write?
I'm not sure if there were any that inspired me to start writing, but during the process, I definitely inspired by Emily Henry's writing. I just think that her writing is so beautiful and emotional, and just it really sucks you into the story. And I really love how she's able to discuss those heavier topics, like grief and Happy Place is one of my favorite books, and that second chance, those relationship struggles that are just so real. I love how she's able to put those into her books, but also make her story still lighthearted,
Yeah.
and be make her readers still able to have that escapism. So I really love her books. And then I read Unsteady by Peyton Corinne, and that's one of my favorite books. And Peyton is she's just a sweet person, and I absolutely love her writing. So those two are a couple authors. There's so many that I could name, but those two are two that definitely inspire me.
Has writing and publishing a book changed the way you see yourself now?
Maybe a little bit.
Mhm.
It's kind of crazy just like seeing that it's like actually real. Because I have author copies now. My arcs are out. And it's kind of crazy to look back a year ago when I hadn't even thought about writing a book into where I am now. It's definitely different. I don't feel different, but it is
It's
different
changed.
just looking
Yeah.
back, seeing the growth.
What advice would you give to a writer working on their first book?
Just to find the process that works the best for you. There's a lot of people, there's a lot of advice that goes around, like you have to plot, you have to do this, like storyboarding is essential. Don't pants your novel, or don't write out of order, like write chronologically, but it's really such an individualized process, and what works for somebody else might not work for you. And I think that's something that's really important, is just finding what works best for you and then just writing. You can't, I'm really bad about this still, but I sometimes I edit as I go and I reread things and then I dwell on it. And but you can't edit what's not written. So focus on finishing the first draft. You can always go back and perfect it and edit it later. First drafts are meant to be messy. They don't have to be perfect. That's something that I'm still working on because I'm a perfectionist.
Yeah.
But that's something that I would advise. And then also just when you're choosing beta readers or alpha readers, find people that you trust, but also people that are willing and will give you constructive feedback, because that's what they're there for. They're there to help you make the book better, and they're not there to, their criticisms aren't out of ill intent. They're there to help you make the book the best it can be. So choose your beta readers and your alpha readers wisely in that aspect. You want hype people, but you also want people who will help make the book better. And then in that same realm, when you're doing those edits, everything is so subjective, and it's important to know that when you get those comments from your beta readers, they're also opinions and you have the final say. It's your
Yep.
book.
And it's your baby that they're helping you like grow and develop, like help it be the best it can be. But you know, you're the boss. You got
Mhm.
you got it. What do you listen to music while you write? And if so, what's your favorite music?
Sometimes I listen to music while I write, but sometimes I don't because I get distracted. I get
Yeah.
distracted very easily. But when I wrote The Pieces We've Lost, I do have a book playlist. So I thought of songs that would kind of fit into the book, into specific scenes, and I put those on the playlist. But then I also wrote scenes and then found songs that would fit. So I kind of did it both ways. Um, so sometimes I would listen to those songs if I was ever in a slump. Um, but sometimes it makes me distracted. But I listen to a lot of country music, just kind of getting into I've always just listened to country music. So that kind of gets me into the writing mood,
Especially
into the scene.
especially since it's a rodeo cowboy.
Yeah.
Um, what's your favorite writing snack or drink?
I am a beverage goblin, so I have like at least 2 to 3 drinks at all times. But this sounds weird, but I love gas station coffee.
That's that's not weird. I'm in Australia, so we're very particular with our coffee, but there's still very good coffee here at gas stations too. I think they have had to be.
It's not like the kind where they like where they grind the beans
Yeah.
and they're like it's not like the right like the black coffee. It's like the fancy coffee
Oh
that doesn't taste like coffee that I like. But lately I've also been drinking the strawberries and cream Dr. Pepper. Really like that.
yeah.
And then water,
Yeah.
although most times I don't drink the water that I have. I drink the other
Yeah.
other drinks that I have. And then for snacks, I'm also always snacking. If I'm not doing anything, it's snacking.
Always the best
But
part of the day.
exactly, like I'd rather snack than eat 3 meals.
Yep.
But pretzels, specifically the Snyder's brand,
Mhm.
um, I tend to hyperfixate on specific snacks and go through my little cycles. So right now I'm like obsessed with the Ritz cheese sandwiches, the mini ones.
Oh, yep.
That come in the bag. I'm obsessed with those. But consistently I feel like pretzels.
You can't go wrong with pretzels at all.
Yeah.
I've got two more questions for you. If you had to describe yourself in 3 words, what would those be?
Ooh, that's a good question. Um, I'd say I'm a perfectionist. Um, this is more than 3 words, but I'm also, well, I guess no, I can make it less than 3 words. I'm a perfectionist. I'm critical of myself. I'm
Mhm.
like I'm my own biggest critic. Um, which doesn't sometimes doesn't make me the most optimistic, but and then the third one. Gosh, this is hard. Making me think of myself. Um, I'd say that I'm pretty ambitious.
Very great words to describe yourself. You always have to have a little bit of ambition as well.
Yeah. It's giving off Leo in Enneagram 3 type.
Yeah. Yes. And my final question is, who has been the biggest supporter of your writing?
My partner, my boyfriend, his name is Chisholm, and he has been probably the biggest supporter of this whole author journey. His family too has been super supportive. My family's been super supportive. His dad tells every single chance that he gets, he tells somebody that I'm writing a book, like literally every chance he gets. But Chisholm has been so supportive. Has also he's also given me a few lines that are actually in the book verbatim. So he joked that he should get writer credits because he books. But No, he's been so supportive. He's the person that I can always count on to encourage me or like read a scene and be honest. Like sometimes you tell people, you send people something and they it like you don't know if they're actually telling the truth, but he's told me things that are like absolutely not include this, and then things on the other hand where it's like this is great. So I feel like I can trust him, but he's been my biggest supporter.
That's fantastic, and especially since he's like you got some really great lines for the book as well from him.
Yes.